Yeah, so okay, I realize Air Ride and Mario Kart are very different games. Kirby Air Ride being much more focused on modes beyond your standard lap racer. But both are Nintendo, both are party games, both heavily feature power-ups, and just shut up, I'm gonna call it the best Mario Kart, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. For those completely unfamiliar with Kirby Air Ride, it's like turning on all items on high in Smash Bros. And quadrupling all the stage hazards, but you're in a car thing. Hovercrafts? There's a good variety of vehicles. If you play Smash No Items Final Destination, I can tell you right away, you will hate this game. Despise it even. Yeah, you can turn off all the stuff in a stage, but it really wasn't designed for it and makes it a lot less fun and unique. I'll also put this out right now, I'm terrible at racing games. I won't even deny it one bit. But it doesn't really matter with this one, because it's purposefully unfair. Don't get me wrong, skill can absolutely get you the win, but it's really not the point. You can switch how much catch-up speed you get while behind, for example, but it actually unbalances the game more when you turn it off than when you leave it at its default. Mostly cause while certain power-ups and hazards will do barely anything to you, some will put you out of commission for a ludicrous amount of time. Cause it's really clear the game wants you to have that feeling of, I'm never going to catch up now. And then somehow push yourself back into second or first place if you really nail those turns, boosts, and alternate paths. And all of those are things you're going to see a lot of. Drifting especially is key in this game, though how that works depends on what vehicle you pick. Most of them, though, are floaty and slippery enough that you're not going to be able to make turns properly without drifting. Usually in a lot of racing games, if you're not drifting, you're going to have to slow down for sharper turns. And not only are almost all the turns in Air Ride laughably sharp, but you can't just slow down. What do you mean you can't slow down? I mean there's no button for the gas, Kirby just zooms. And that's why the drifting mechanic is a bit different and called boosting. Now most vehicles have either slightly different or drastically different drifting mechanics, but for most of the more normal ones it works like this. You hold the button and Kirby basically loses all forward speed. Now, on some vehicles, this still means you drift a bit with residual momentum, and with others this means you stop dead. In order to compensate for speed loss while you're holding the button, a boost gauge starts filling up, so when you release the button, Kirby rockets back up to speed. And if you leave it too long, your vehicle stalls, and has to charge the gauge back up again, so timing is key. This isn't just super useful for turns, but some vehicles either barely move or don't move at all if you don't boost. Now, I will admit again, I'm pretty bad at this mechanic, but on the flip side, I'll also say that even though I can't pull it off that well most of the time, it's actually still pretty fun. It gives the races a much more immediate feeling, because you're having to factor in perfect angles, like trying to bounce yourself off an invisible pinball paddle. But unlike pinball, you have near perfect control over the direction you're going to zip off in. So when you mess up, it feels like it's on you rather than the game's fault. Also, unlike pinball, you're not constrained to a flat plane. As you may have noticed from the footage, touching the track is more of a guideline than a rule. Yet before Mario Kart did it, Kirby had gliding mechanics, and really good ones at that. That doesn't always mean it'll be easy to control. Precision really depends on the vehicle you choose. A lot of the time, the thing you're riding is good on the ground, it'll be trash in the sky, and vice versa, with a few sitting somewhere in the middle. A good couple of vehicles can't even glide at all, but they make up for it by being capable of jumping higher straight up, better than any of the flyers, among other bonuses. And if it sounds like there's no way all these vehicle types can be balanced, it's 'cause they're very much not. While a handful are decent all around, most tracks favor some specific category of vehicle. This is pretty good at forcing you to switch around and experiment with different playstyles. I know I'm the kind of person that easily gets bogged down in maining something in a game, but whatever pulls me towards that is just dampened by the vehicle and stage selection in Kirby Air Ride. So either way, if you like swapping around, you're rewarded. And if you find that hard, you're given encouragement to break out of that mentality without it feeling forced. If you just want to use your old steady, you could absolutely be competitive on almost any stage. Well, not this version of Rainbow Road, because if someone's using the Swerve Star, you'll just get blitzed. But that's fine, because this track's the worst one, and you will probably never want to race it anyway. I haven't mentioned yet either, but you're not going to get all the vehicles from the start, at least not in the standard racing mode. This game is not just chocked full of unlockables, it's practically built out of them. I was checking how long to beat to see how long it'd take me to get most of the stuff, and I was like, oh, about 23 hours, that's a pretty good amount of content. And then my eyes wandered down to the completionist average, and wow. If you really want to get everything out of this game, it's going to be like 5 Mario Karts put together. And you might say now, hey wait, I don't see that many vehicles or stages in this footage. What the hell are you even unlocking? And you're asking that because I haven't revealed the secret about this game that everyone who has ever played it knows. That being that almost no one plays Kirby Air Ride for its main racing mode. No, it's all about City Trial. Anyone who tells you any differently is actively trying to deceive you, and you should never trust them again on anything. Top Ride is underrated, and good too, and I'll get to that. But right now, it is City Trial time. City Trial is essentially a 2-part experience. The first half is a sort of open-world scavenger hunt in this big map with a bunch of different biomes. Every Kirby starts on a trashy vehicle. It's like a bootlegged version of the classic Warp Star. Spawning randomly around the map are a bunch of boxes and power-ups you can smash and grab, along with a bunch of vehicles you can hop on. The trick is a bunch of power-ups are unique to this mode, and basically give your vehicle permanent stat boosts, like turning, top speed, glide, etc. After the time limit is reached, everyone takes their current vehicle and stat boost to the second half of City Trial. The second half being a randomly selected minigame ranging from classic drag races to demolition derbies to high jumps into scoreboards. This is what it's all about. This is the real meat of Kirby Air Ride. It's such a creative, deep yet bite-sized way of playing a racing game. And that's not to say the other modes aren't fun, because they very much all are. If all this game had was track racing, it'd still be a decent game, just not anything beyond the ordinary. But that's beside the point, because City Trial exists and it's the best. Not only is there a good amount of variety in the second half minigames, but this is where a lot of the unlocks factor back in. In-game it's called the Stadium, and similar to the other modes, all the unlocks get this satisfying Minesweeper-style unlock indicator, letting you see the requirements for adjacent challenges. And beyond just getting new minigames, there's also quite a few other things you can get, such as instead of just your standard demo derby courses, there's also variation courses like Everyone vs. King Dedede. And while almost all vehicles are unlocked from the start to get randomly dropped in the first phase of City Trial, there are a few special air ride machines to earn through these stadium challenges too. Now, while obviously the amount of second stage minigames helps keep that part of the City Trial fresh, you might think that the static first phase probably gets a little boring. And that would be much more true if there weren't so many little nooks and interesting areas built into the city map. On top of which, the time limit you're given by default is low enough that if you want to make sure you've got a vehicle you like and the stat boost to remain competitive, you've got to really budget your time around the map. There are also special events that occur once every match, ranging from things like a meteorite impact, vehicle malfunctions, fake power-ups, and UFOs, though I would say the rate at which some of these events crop up could use a little tweaking. There are also all sorts of neat little design choices that make the act of traversing the map full of alternate routes and options. One of the most useful of these being the big rail that loops around the city, enterable and exitable via these sort of bus stops in every major section of the map. But underneath also lies a sprawling tunnel network that crisscrosses swaths of the city and even connects to a few underground rooms hidden beneath the forest. Speaking of which, there's this little diorama of the city under the big tree that I just always thought was neat. It's just that there's so many little details and bits built into the map that are completely unnecessary and out of the way enough that you'll probably only visit them every so often while racing around for items. But that's exactly what keeps it feeling fresh too. Too many modes and games with maps you hit over and over again end up burning a sort of schedule into your head, where when you start a new match you think, okay, I've got to go here and then over here in that order to min-max this round. But because of the random scattering of items and all the alt pathways leading to different nooks and crannies of the map, every match is much more about gambling on which route or area to spend your precious time on. If the quantity of random generation and selection puts you off, and all you care about are hard numbers and skill, then there's always free run mode where you can really nail down your times. But if instead of being overwhelmed by the randomization gimmicks, you're underwhelmed and want more, there's always the last mode, Top Ride. Top Ride switches things to an isometric view and a tiny track, using 2 unique vehicles with controls tailored to the new camera angle. The best way I can describe Top Ride is to say that if the standard races are like golf, then Top Ride is like mini-golf. And that means, by default and common consensus, it is automatically better. All the stages are dense with hazards, switches, and weird entities that'll destroy or boost your lead, along with a copious amount of items to either push you forward or keep the other Kirbys behind. The small size of the course means that every delay or hit you take can send you way behind, but on the flip side, that also means that it's incredibly easy to catch back up. especially with some of the items the game likes to spawn in for last place players, similar to a blue shell. You'd think that this kind of out-of-way mode, with its dinky little tracks and general lack of interesting unlocks, would be the bite-sized casual mode for pick up and play. But that is far, far from reality. This may be the most chaotic and competitive part of all of Kirby Air Ride. No other mode in the game has your direct actions so immediately and often screw over the other racers. If you have friends that get really salty over head-to-head games, especially with randomized mechanics that are easily construed as unfair to those really invested in winning, this mode is the mode that'll start fights and rivalries. Playing right and keeping up the heat can allow you to keep other players out of the race completely, if they never manage to snatch an opportunity to hit you back. Sometimes the game, through sheer chance, can appear to just be adamant in ruining your life at every turn for whole matches. That being said, if you either don't take it too seriously and embrace the chaos, or if you want to take it seriously but like the challenge that having crazy things popping off constantly brings, this is actually a pretty great mode with a decent amount of replayability. I think it's often neglected because it's kind of weird, not what people who pick up a racing game are usually looking for, and takes a second to get the hang of, but if you give it a chance, it grows on you faster than you'd think. Plus, because every track is small and dense, it feels like a lot more tweaking, thought, and balancing went into all their designs, with every course having multiple gimmicks that bleed into each other due to their proximity, that keeps you on your toes with very little to no downtime between hazards and potential boosts. There's always either something in front of you have to avoid, something good to your side you're trying to hit, or another player coming from behind to flatten you. In a way, it's sort of a distillation of the key elements from the other two modes, in a combined format with new tricky but ultimately simple controls. And even if all that is getting stale or balance not to your liking, every mode is fairly customizable in terms of their rules. Like mentioned before, you've got control over your lagging behind boost, and pretty standard features like CPU level, handicap, and color selection, but also the ability to switch things like races being finished by lap count to time count instead, changing up CPU cars if you don't like the randomization rule they got, and whether or not enemies appear on the stage at all. Yeah, a lot of this may sound like a given nowadays, but back during the early 2000s, it was not a given you were going to get these kind of options. And it especially would have been pretty typical for a spin-off racing game focusing on minigames and marketed as a much more casual experience to be one of those that no one bothered to add options to. In fact, it kind of amazes me that all this stuff I've talked about is even in Kirby Air Ride in the first place. I mean, they could have easily just made a simplified Mario Kart clone like every other kart racer that tried their hand. Like, I can easily see an alternate timeline where Kirby Air Ride turned out as much more of a Sonic R type game than what we got, especially with verticality, unlocks, and item searching being big elements in both. In a way, Kirby Air Ride kind of feels like it's a sequel in a long-running franchise that's just accumulated a bunch of features over the course of its run, like a later Mario Kart game. Except it's the first and only entry to ever be put out. And yeah, I know the game got trashed a bit because of its perceived simplicity. And yeah, they're right, I mean, just look at it. You basically just zoom forward and charge boosts, and that's most of the depth in terms of vehicle handling all in one sentence. But the game's controls and handling had to be simple in order to facilitate the variety of game modes and minigame styles. In your average kart racer, or even real car racer. Yeah, some players will mess around with alt modes, but 99% of the audience just plays the main courses with default settings, and so that core gameplay has to carry the brunt of the game. If you make a Mario Kart game and the act of just driving down a track fast and making all the turns well isn't continuously engaging by itself, then you've already missed the mark and people are going to get bored. But with Air Ride, while its core certainly isn't bad, its priority is being flexible and supplying you with enough movement options and techniques for the alternate game modes, rule sets, and general hazardous chaos the game modularly builds around its simple racing framework. If the base racing was complex and deep, not only would it get completely buried under everything else that goes on in a round of racing or city trial, it'd be near impossible to balance for every feature and odd minigame they wanted to include. The closest we get to that is the alternative controls in Top Ride. If that was the case with every single different mode or minigame, Kirby Air Ride would be a slog to play, constantly having to swap between methods of control every couple of minutes. And while some games like Mario Party do that, 1, those minigames are shorter and have decent downtime between them, and 2, it's so immediately confusing for first-time players that they literally have a demo screen for each of them. Instead, the majority of Kirby Air Ride has the same basic core feeling in terms of how vehicles handle, meaning that other than Top Ride, pretty much anytime you get better in one mode, those learned skills will carry over into most other parts of the game. Getting good at hitting those secret paths while gliding in standard Air Ride mode? You'll probably also now be better at hitting the scoreboard in the stadium. Ultimately, what makes the game really work, in a genre that many games end up floundering in, is that Kirby Air Ride is more than just the sum of its parts. Yes, individually, other games have hit the same beats, and on focus examination, no one aspect is all that deep. But, put together, and balanced for the more random and emergent elements in a kart racer, Kirby Air Ride carves out a niche for itself that I've yet to see any other game properly attempt. And all of that perfectly explains why it's the best Mario Kart. And there are no holes in that reasoning, and you know it's the best Mario Kart. No questions. No further thoughts. You know it's the best Mario Kart.